Now, what if I told you that I have a drug which can cure everything? I have something with me which can cure everything. What would you say? Sorry? No, it's called the placebo. Yeah. So, and a placebo is a very maligned term. The word psychosomatic is a very maligned term. It's usually meant for people who are weak-willed, and when we are sick of a patient, we say, "Acha ji, ye kar lo." It's not that. A placebo is a very powerful response. Psychosomatic response is a very, very powerful response. And the placebo effect first came into being when drugs were being tested, that this group got the real drug, this group got the unreal drug. And the success rate in the unreal drug was ranging between 30 to 80%. So people said, let's remove these people from the drug and let's get some new people. Oh, phir placebos aa gaye. So everyone got very confused, and this continues to bug the pharmaceutical company as to what to do with this placebo response. And you can see various examples of the placebo response. Panadol is paracetamol. So you give people, there was a study, in fact, which gave people paracetamol, regular paracetamol, Panadol, which came from America, and a beautiful other pill, which was very expensive. So the expensive pill worked the best, which had nothing in it. Or they tested people with branded aspirin and unbranded aspirin, and a placebo, again, the same results. So it was very funny that this happened, and people studies, and I believe that, which I've shared earlier, that the drug Viagra, what it means? Niagara, which is these falls, and vigor, right? So Niagara and Viagra. So I'm sure that if Viagra was called floppy, it wouldn't work. So all these things, when people find meaning in what was given to them, if you have a Band-Aid with a Snoopy on it, it works better. If you have a more painful injection, it works better. And people don't do this study just for fun. They're testing a particular drug, they're testing a particular inhaler for asthma and things like that. And so many studies where people were given just, something and their asthma improved, people who were on statin therapy and all these things. Another very funny study was done in Europe, where they found that blue-colored sleeping pills were better than pink. Except in Italy. Blue is the calm color and pink is another color maybe. And so in Italy, it didn't work. The blue pills didn't work. And it didn't work only in men, not in women. So the theory was that blue is the jersey of the football team, which is activity. And therefore, it didn't work in the men. And blue is the color of Mother Mary's cloak, which the women related to more. Small things like that. Even when, say, I prescribe a medicine and you're supposed to tell the patient of the side effects, but sometimes I don't. I said, if they get it, I'll tell them. Because if I tell them that iske saath tera muँह सूख सकता है, अगले दिन phone आएगा, डॉक्टर साहब मुँह सूख रहा है. जिसको मैं नहीं बताता, उसका नहीं होता. So it's what is happening in the placebo response? What is really it's number one, the belief and the faith in that something is being given to me. And the second is the faith in the doctor. So even my faith in a particular medicine, when I am delivering, when Tegamet came for ulcers, it worked wonders, but then Tegamet got replaced by Zantac, and then Tegamet stopped working. And that Zantac got replaced by the Prazols, and the Zantac stopped working, And this is, again, our own belief, in the medicine. Why tetracycline or some antibiotics will work for the viral sore throat? We don't know, but it works, And I also tried it myself, on my own self. So the placebo response, when we're trying to look at what happened, at the same time, there was this study or research going on to where in the brain does morphine attach itself. So they found that morphine attaches itself to a receptor in the brain, and the receptor is like, the morphine is the key and the receptor is the lock. So it goes in and opens the lock. But they said that why should the brain have a receptor for a compound made out of poppies, So the theory was that maybe the body itself produced a morphine-like substance. And that was the discovery of endorphin, that we possess a natural painkiller inside our body called endorphin. And in these states where a person believes that this is being given to me, the endorphin levels go up and my pain gets less. This can explain, this can explain pain relief, but it cannot explain many other things. So, If you look at a neuron is a brain cell, okay? When the neuron discharges, an electrical impulse actually runs down the neuron, excites the other neuron, it travels up to the nucleus, to the DNA of the nucleus, and stimulates the genes. So one thought produced this chemical, which we call the neurotransmitter, like serotonin, dopamine, you may have heard of these. So in a second, my thought produced the neurotransmitter, which went into this, it activated the genes made new proteins, it made new connections, and this is purely a firm example of mind-body stuff that within seconds, a thought has caused, improvement of this. Then there are substances called neuropeptides, of which endorphin is one. And as time went by, many other compounds were discovered. 60, 70 other compounds were discovered, which actually responded to different emotions of joy, of happiness, of sorrow, or even attitude. If I have a particular attitude, I will reduce a certain amount of chemicals. And this is how certain things work. Now, a receptor is like if this particular neuropeptide has a shape like a three-dimensional shape, it will fit into the receptor, which is also like that. It's like these children's game, where you have a peg in a round hole. So a round peg will fit into this hole and a square peg will not. But the neuron doesn't behave like children's toys. The more of this chemical that keeps coming, the brain continues to produce more and more receptors. So depending on what emotion I'm releasing, my receptors for that emotion will keep increasing. Now neuropeptides don't, and then also the discovery that these receptors are present not only in the brain, but throughout the body. And they mostly are situated in our intestines, our gut, which responds for the gut feelings. They are in our hormonal systems, they are in our immune systems, and many other organs. So this is the way the brain talks to the body and the body talks back to the brain. Now these neuropeptides, as I said, don't hang around the body. They travel down the bloodstream, and let's say a neuropeptide of impatience is traveling down the body. Now the cell which has the receptor of impatience will pick up this neuropeptide and will tell the cell to behave in that particular way. Now as I develop more and more patience, these receptors will actually fall off and the cells will start behaving themselves. Now when a neuropeptide hits a cell, it stimulates the cell to do something. So if it's a negative thought, it's going to produce a negative reaction in my cell. This is all a simple chemical theory by which this happens. Now, it goes deeper than that. A thought not only stimulates the brain cells, it also stimulates my other cells. So the DNA produces, which are producing genes for repair, for that, they also get affected. So if, for example, I'm hostile and my hostility, my wounds won't heal because my chemical that went inside was a hostile chemical. It told my gene not to react. So, like these fairy lights in a tree, which go, band khul, band khul, band khul. Genes are something like that. The gene's activity can get up-regulated or down-regulated depending on what we are doing and what we are thinking. Coming to genes, a lot of us believe that, if in my family, if there's heart disease, I will also get heart disease. We all know that if we change our habits and we stop smoking and we lose weight, even when we do that, the activity is reflected in the genes. But when studies have also shown that when I become less hostile, I stop complaining, I'm more optimistic, I'm more positive, I'm more grateful, if I relate to people in different ways, that those genes, which are healthy genes, will get upregulated and so on. They've done studies on people who were entered into a questionnaire. And in the questionnaire, they decided this is an optimistic and this is a pessimistic person. And these guys were given nasal drops of a particular virus. And they were followed up for 3 months, and they found that the optimistic people, a very small percentage got the cold, whereas the other people did not, So this is one way that the placebo effect takes place through our neuropeptides and our neurochemicals and all that. The other way that it happens is that we have in our bodies something called the stress response. And the stress response is basically meant to protect us, right? This is mediated through a system called the sympathetic nervous system. Nothing to do with sympathy, but the sympathetic nervous system quickens my pulse rate, raises my heart and blood pressure and all that. So We have an area in the brain which is called the amygdala. And when, let's say, in the primitive times or whatever, there was a tiger on the loose, let's say, the amygdala was to signal the hypothalamus the pituitary, and the pituitary is to signal the adrenal gland to secrete these hormones like cortisone, epinephrine, adrenaline, and that used to cause my heart rate to go, because I needed to run at that time, my blood pressure to go up. Blood used to be taken away from my stomach and going into my legs because I don't need to digest my food then. The blood vessels constricted because in case I got injured, to prevent blood loss, and so on and so on. If this stress response continues, my muscles will get tight, my immune system will go down, and everything. So my amygdala actually is not very clever. It cannot differentiate between a tiger on the loose, or my wife doesn't love me, or I hate my job, or as simple as somebody spilled red wine on my white shirt. It will behave the same way as if a tiger is on the loose. Now, all of you have seen Animal Planet and National Geographic. If you've ever seen a lion chasing a gazelle, the lion is also in that stress response because it wants to eat. The gazelle is under stress because it doesn't want to be eaten. But after some time, if the lion doesn't catch the gazelle, what happens? The lion says, "Acha, main sone laga hu," and the gazelle starts grazing again. But humans are not like that. We allow the stress response to balloon because one thought will lead to second, lead to third. Because as humans, we have the privilege of making our thought very real. So I will start imagining one thing after the other, and I will constantly be bathing in these chemicals, which will then activate my genes and give me the disease which my parents had, or will upregulate or downregulate the good genes and upregulate, and vice versa. So this is actually what is happening when my stress response is. So at the conscious level or the unconscious level, if I'm actually in a stress response, it's protective to me. But even if I have a thought, and we have so many thoughts, conscious or a subconscious level under the level of awareness, all of these will stimulate these chemicals, and these chemicals will then obviously produce the disease. Now let's say I have happy thought. Some chemical is released, and that chemical will go and produce a feeling inside my body because it's a chemical. So now I start to feel the way I'm thinking. So I'm feeling insecure. I'll send the message for insecurity, and my body will start feeling insecure. So my body starts to feel the way I'm thinking. So we get used to behaving in a thinking manner. That means we are thinking, we are no longer thinking. Feeling becomes the way of our thinking, And if I feel that this thing is not going to be good for me, I don't do it. Now, something strange happens again. My body is now feeling the way I'm thinking. Now my brain is in constant communication with my body. It's constantly monitoring my environment. So when it feels this feeling, it starts to think, what is this feeling? So it starts to think the same way as the body. Are you with me? The thought produces the feeling, and the brain started to think about the feeling and started to feel or think the way my body was feeling. So it produces more chemicals. So we get into this cycle that thinking produces a feeling and feeling produces a thinking. And this gets hardwired inside my body. So if I have a stomach ache, it's this cycle, this hardwired cycle that actually forms and continues. And anything that stimulates this cycle, whether at the conscious or the unconscious level, will actually produce this. And this is what happens, that we actually keep thinking and again and again and again, and that's how we get unwell. Then there's this theory of what we call neuroplasticity. What is neuroplasticity? We always used to think that our brains are solid lumps of matter and it cannot change. But actually neurosciences have now shown that every time I get a stimulus from my five senses, a nerve fiber is formed. And a nerve fiber is formed not just from my senses, but even if I think. So if I am constantly using my right hand, that transcranial brain imaging will show that my right hand, that the cells which are controlling my right hand are actually getting more developed. So they did this experiment that, focusing on pain makes the pain become more. So they asked people to focus on their pain in the hip, and they did the imaging, and they found that that area of the brain which controlled the hip was lighting up. And then they told them to divert their attention somewhere else, and that lighting up came down again. And when it came down again, the pain went down. And then they said, hey, where's the pain? And the light came up again.